Hello Stitchers, it's Jenny from Jenny Stitches. Welcome back to my channel and thank you for tuning in today. Now I'm here today in a slightly different setting with a slightly different kind of video to usual. I'm going to be making a t-shirt and I'd like you to sew along with me. So the pattern that I'm going to be making today is the Helen's Closet Jackson tee. I'm going to pop in a picture here for you so you can see the pattern cover. I have made the Jackson tee before. It's a fab little pattern, a really good beginner level t-shirt design. And what I love about it is it's very size inclusive and it's also gender neutral. So it literally is the t-shirt for everybody. Now the t-shirt pattern comes with a short and a long sleeve option, and you can get an expansion pack for it to turn it into a hoodie because there's also a sweater option on the pattern. But today we're just sewing a nice basic round neck short sleeve tee. Okay, so my plan at the moment is I want to make 6 of these t-shirts to hang in the shop window in a nice rainbow of colours like I've got behind me here. So today I'm going to be sewing up the royal blue colourway. So I've got my pieces cut out. I've been cutting these out across the space of the week, so everything is ready to go. I've got my machine threaded up for the stitching parts of it, and I've also got the overlocker threaded up here, which I will bring into shot shortly, and I've got my iron ready to go. Other bits and pieces of tools that I have are my Prim micro serration shears. These are super handy for everything. I have fabric clips, which I really like when I'm working with knits, and just a good selection of pins. And to be quite honest with you, that's all we need. So let's get stuck in. Okay, I'm going to move the sewing machine out of the way just so that we can see what we're doing, hopefully. And the first thing that I'm going to do is join the front to the back at the shoulder seams along the top here. So I'm going to start with my back piece there and pop that right sides up, and I'm going to lay my front piece on top of it so that they are right sides together. Now then, that's wrong side. Let's get that the right way up. It's very hard with these plain jerseys to tell which way is which. So what I'm going to do there is just make sure that the front and the back is nice and evenly aligned. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my fabric clips to clip them together. Okay, so now we've got the front and the back clipped together there. We can see this is going to be nice and oversized, which I love. Probably just tell you a little bit about my history with t-shirt sewing. I would say that sewing t-shirts is one of the things that really got me into dressmaking. I'd done quite a bit of sewing on other items, but I first made a t-shirt, I would say in 2012, because I remember my son was a baby at the time, and it was around that time, 2012 or 13, and the pattern had just been released by Sewaholic. And if you don't know, Sewaholic was a Canadian brand, and the lady that ran it was fabulous. I absolutely loved following her blog back in the day, and there really wasn't many indie brands around at that time, and she released a t-shirt pattern called the Renfrew t-shirt, and oh, I love that pattern. It was my first to go at sewing knits. I'd really been intimidated by sewing with knits before then, and I gave it a go, and on an old piece of fabric, well, not an old piece, but like a piece of jersey I'd had sat in my stash for ages, and I absolutely loved the result. It was the first time I've been able to make a garment that I felt like I would go and buy in a shop, in terms of it was a go-to kind of wearable piece. And from that moment on, I was hooked. I made loads of those tops, and still now, jersey tops and t-shirts are my go-to palette cleanser. Now then, I'm just going to go and pop and check the instructions for the seam allowance on this pattern, because it's just popped out of my head. Okay, so I'm glad that I checked that, because the seam allowance for this pattern is 3/8 of an inch, which is about a centimetre. So not the standard kind of 5/8 of an inch, which we might get with woven pattern. So what I like to do to check that I've got my seam allowance right is to use my little Prim sliding gauge here, the knit saw gauge, and I set that to 3/8 of an inch, and I just tend to take a look at my needle and take a look at my presser foot and just work out where it's going to be. I know I've got markings on the throat plate of this machine, and yours probably does too, but I'm still getting used to these machines. I've rented some workshop machines from Janome, which is amazing, but yeah, I'm still not 100% on how they work. If you'd seen my video at Christmas time of me working on this pinafore that I'm wearing, you'll know that I was still getting to grips with sort of needle positions and so on there. So let's just get those thread tails out of the way. Okay, so I am using the lightning bolt stitch on the machine. You will have to check your manual for the machine that you use. You might have what we call a lightning bolt stitch, which is a very narrow zigzag, or you can just use a standard zigzag stitch. And that just allows the stitches to stretch with the sort of stretching of the fabric. You can also use Mariflex thread, which I can 100% recommend, and I often do use, but because I'm trying to make a lot of different coloured t-shirts here, I'm just trying to use up bits of ordinary thread from my thread stash. So that's sewn all the way across there. I'm choosing not to stabilise the shoulder seam on this one because it is such a loose, oversized fit. I really don't think it's going to be bagging out at all. Just trim away those threads. And we'll do the same for the other side. So now that I've got both shoulder seams joined, I'm going to get the overlocker and we're going to finish those seams off. So the number one message that I want to just quickly point out here is that you do not need an overlocker to sew knits. That seam that we have just sewn there could be pressed open and left as it is. Knits do not fray, which is good news. So you could just press that nice and flat and it would be absolutely fine. However, if you do have an overlocker, you never look back. They're fabulous and they create such a lovely finish. Now, because I'm doing so many different colours, I haven't matched my overlocking thread to my project today. I'm using these lovely rainbow cones. Oops, not what we've got going on there. And I threaded those up earlier and did a little test swatch here on some fabric. If I just hold that up to show you on a scrap of pink fabric, you can see that the overlocking is all rainbow colours there. So I think that's going to give a really nice effect. So I'm going to go ahead and just overlock the seams that we've just done. I pray to the overlocking gods that everything just runs smoothly. Because things don't run smoothly when you're filming them, do they? Oops. She says, pressing the wrong pedal. This overlocking thread is so much fun. Can we see the colours there? It's going to look lovely on the inside. Okay, and we'll do the other side now as well. So in a couple of weeks' time here in the workshop, we have our first introduction to, well, get to know your overlocker course, which the lovely Lucy of Sew Cumbria is coming to teach, and I am so looking forward to seeing what happens in that workshop, because I think there's going to be so much to learn, even having used an overlocker for many years now. I know I certainly don't use mine to its full potential, so I am going to be a quiet participant in that class, I can tell you. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this to the iron and press the seams to the back. If in doubt, we always press to the back. A bit hard to work out which is the front and back at this stage. I've got my fancy new iron, which everybody on the socials is fascinated by. Because when you let go of the handle, it stands up by itself. It's so snazzy. It is a good iron though, I am enjoying using it. Okay. And it's nice to be back at a machine after a long break since before Christmas. I mistakenly thought that owning a sewing shop would mean that I had lots of time for sewing, but how wrong was I? Hopefully this year we will rectify that issue. Okay, I'm just going to press that from both sides just to make sure it's nice and neat and flat, and those seams aren't crossing anywhere. Great. Okay. So now we have our front and a back. Okay, so the next step is going to be to tackle the neckband, and this can be quite intimidating when you first start out, because neckbands can be tricky things, and depending on the stretch percentage of your fabric and generally the quality of your fabric in terms of how well behaved it is, they can pose the odd problem. However, that being said, over many years and many t-shirts, I haven't had that many issues, and I would definitely say that using good quality fabric is a key contender in how well you get your neckband in. But like, as with anything, practice makes perfect. So a bit of tea. So we have our neckband piece here, it's one long strip, and the first thing that we're going to do is join the two ends together to make it into a loop. However, before I do that, I'm going to press it in half, right sides together, just to get the crease. For once it's joined up, it will be easier to repress at that point. If you catch what I mean, it's easier to press it now whilst it's open, and then once it's open, we've kind of got that memory crease there already. Kind of thinking that I really should have printed a copy of the instructions for this pattern. But there we go. Now, jersey being a knit fabric, it does have a tendency to curl. Again, depending on the weight and the quality of your jersey, it will curl more if it's finer, and if it's a bit cheaper, if I'm honest. The good quality stuff is a bit more well behaved. This is my plain cotton jersey, which is 95% cotton to 5% elastane. I absolutely adore this fabric. The weight is just beautiful. You don't get those thin, nasty t-shirts that you get out of the supermarkets. And it just washes and wears really well. So I've got that nicely pressed in. Just touch that corner up. And then I'm going to open that back up now. So I've now got my crease pressed, and right sides together, I'm going to join those short ends, and I'm just going to pop a clip on there just to hold them in place. and bring the machine back. I have to make sure I get the right foot pedal this time. Okay, so again with that 1 centimetre seam allowance. So now that I've joined those short ends together, I'm going to press that little seam allowance open. This is quite fiddly. And I'm going to bring it right sides together again, as we did along that crease that I've already pressed. And I'm just going to do that again. Just make sure it's all nice and neat and crisp. Okay, here comes the fun part. Let's have some tea. There's a lot of different ways to get a neckband into a t-shirt. You will see a lot of different tips and tricks around the internet, and that's amazing. What I'm going to show you is how I do mine, and this may or may not work for you. So I've got that join here, and I want to find, I'm going to use what you would call the quartering method, essentially. And what I'm going to do there is take that seam to the top and fold it in half. Now you can use the iron here if you like to find the other end. So now I'm going to put a clip at the top and a clip at the bottom, and those are my first 2 quarters. Put them on the raw edge, join them together. Then I'm going to bring those 2 clips together like so, and that's going to enable me to find the other quarters. And again, you can use your iron to sort of give those a little mark. Place 1 clip and 2. So now I've got my neckband piece divided into 4 equal quarters. So I'm going to move this iron out of the way and bring the body of the t-shirt back. Okay, so if I lay this out flat, we have got, I'm getting a tangle with it, around the neck hole of the garment we have notches. So we've got a notch, tiny little clip notch at the centre front and at the centre back, and then we've got the shoulder seams. So I'm going to line up the seam on my neckband piece with the centre back of the t-shirt. Now, many different patterns will ask you to put this in different places. For me, I like it at the centre back because it helps me determine which way around the t-shirt goes on. And that for me is just personally something that I found really useful. I know on a lot of other patterns that I've sewn, you sometimes line it up with a shoulder seam, but I like it that way. It helps me work out where the back is. I don't mind if it's a little bit more visible there. And I'm going to line up its opposite number with the centre front. Then I'm going to pick it up. Now, technically, when quartering, we should measure around the neck hole, if you will, and find that equal distance. But what I'm going to do here is, because I've got my centre front and back there, is just grab and gently stretch that band out and kind of, I don't know the best way to explain this to you, but gently kind of find the centre as it goes, and I think that is roughly around here. And we would just want to be spreading out that stretch on the neckband, roughly about 1 inch down from the shoulder seam. Just spreading it out nice and evenly and making sure that it's not twisted. Okay, get that onto there. And what I do like to do now is work between the clips or the pins if you're using pins, and just gently stretch the band onto the neck and then ease that fullness in. So if I stretch it out so that they're equal, and then pinch a point where that's going to meet up in the middle there, and pop a clip on, and then you can sort of fill in the gaps with as many clips as you like, keeping that seam allowance going in the direction we want it to go. Now, this process definitely just comes with a bit of practice. Whoops, a daisy. Could make some excellent bloopers out of this video. But the more t-shirts you make and the more neckbands that you put in, the better at it you get. And you know, sometimes it just doesn't run perfectly, and that's okay too. But we want to keep those free raw edges, so the two edges of the neckband piece and of the shirt nice and evenly aligned. Okay, and as you can see, I'm just pulling that out to meet. Again, line up, pinch, and clip. The more the merrier as pins and clips are concerned. So now I've got plenty of clips on there. I think I might just pop another one on at the back there, just to make sure. Whoops, I keep throwing them. Make sure that that is filled in. Okay, what I like to do at this point is give everything a nice check. So lay it out nice and flat and just check that it all looks sensible. The body part will look bunched up, but that's fine because the stretch of the neckband is going to take care of that for us. Yeah, so then I can just adjust where I don't feel like I've really got it evenly spaced. That's a bit better. Don't want to move that centre on. Let's move you to there. Okay, so now I'm going to take this back to the machine and I'm going to machine tack it in place. And that's, I'm going to use a tacking stitch because I don't want to use the lightning bolt stitch in case I want to change it. It's a nightmare to unpick. So I'm just going to adjust my stitch to a nice straight stitch with the needle in the centre, and I'm going to lengthen my stitch to around 3.5mm, so a nice long stitch. And what I'm going to do is start at the back where that join is and get it under the machine, and we will tack it in place. So to prevent any, hopefully, any nicks in the fabric, what I like to do is remove the next clip as I come to it and just gently tug on that neckband to make sure that everything is nice and flat underneath, and I tend to just run my fingers along to make sure there's no bumps and bumps. Just all the while keeping an eye on the edge of the piece that everything's nice and lined up. But as long as we leave the needle in, we can just manipulate as we go. And you know, some patterns are drafted differently to others. You will find some neckband pieces are more of a battle to put in than others. Some just slot in nicely and don't take a lot of wiggling. Others you can feel like it's not going to work out. But this, thankfully, is a good one. Moment of truth, let's check whether this looks okay. So once that's sewn in, we just want to turn it to the right side and check that we don't have any obvious nicks and tucks in it, but that looks fine to me. As you can see, we have got the neckband piece in there. Now, it will look a bit bunchy to begin with, that's fine. It's nothing that a bit of steam and a bit of top stitching won't sort out. But first, I'm going to take that to the overlocker and just overlock off that raw edge. And that's also going to help it sit nice and flat. And again, I'm just going to start carefully overlocking around from the back. And just be really, really careful because this is a voice of bitter experience, to take your time and just check that everything's lined up nicely, lying nice and flat, that you're not catching any of the other areas of your shirt under your overlocker blade, because that's how you end up with holes in your garments. And I can tell you this because I have done it. What I'm doing here as well is just catching my overlocking stitch slightly over the tacking stitch that I've made, so that that is then becoming the seam itself rather than relying on a tacking stitch to be the main seam. This overlocking thread is divine. I absolutely love it. Okay, so you can see, well, I hope you can see that we've got overlocking around that neck hole now. I'm going to get this pressed out lovely and flat. I'm just going to give it a press from the wrong side first, just to make sure I've got my seam allowance going in the right direction. Oh, I love it. These corns are so cool. You could leave these on and just never take them off, basically. Okay, and then let's give that a press from the right side. Make sure that that seam allowance is sitting where we want it to be. Okay, looking good. Now everything isn't going to sit perfectly flat until we top stitch. That's really going to transform how this sits down. Now if you're using Mariflex thread, you can use a straight stitch to top stitch around the neckline. If, like me, you're using an ordinary machine thread, you're going to need to use a zigzag stitch, or you could use a twin needle at this point. Or alternatively, if you have access to one, you can use a cover stitch machine to go around that neck. But there we go. Okay, so let's get back to the machine. As with the other steps to this, I'm going to start with the back of the neck. We don't want any visible crossovers, starts, finishes at the front. We want to start at the back where it's nice and out of the way. I'm removing the free arm there, so I've got lots of room to maneuver, and I'm just going to line up the needle so that the we are top stitching over that overlocked edge. Going to say, okay, so now I need to find a regular zigzag on here, which is stitch 7 by the looks of things, and I'm going to set that to be around 2.5 by 2.5. That makes a nice stitch. Okay, let's go. And just meet back up with that first stitch in and centre back, and I think we'll just go backwards for a couple of stitches just to lock that in place. Perfect. Okay. Clip the seam and see how this looks. Clip these threads even, not seam. It's quite late on a Friday evening and I'm ready to go home. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to give it a little press just so the seam can set those stitches in place. But as you can see, we've got that lovely zigzag stitch going around the edge there, and it's all sitting really nice and flat and beautiful, and that just transforms how the neck looks. To you! The next part of the process is to insert the sleeves, and one thing that I love about sewing with knits is the ability to put in a sleeve flat. There is none of this wiggling in a set-in sleeve and gathering stitches or anything like that. It's lovely and straightforward. Okay, so what we're going to do is open out the work and have it right sides up. And I'm hoping you can see here, I have my armhole opening. And I'm going to find the corresponding sleeve piece for this. Now this is where it looks a little bit odd because obviously this is quite a big U shape. It's like a bath, and the top of the sleeve head is like a mountain. That's how I like to put it. So I'm using the notches on my sleeve piece to guide me. Double notch to the back, single notch to the front, and when I'm right sides together, that's this sleeve piece. So I'm going to match up the notch on the top of the shoulder seam, the double notch towards the back, and just place a clip. And then just edges there. Now, when you have had a bit more practice and you're more confident in sewing with knits, you can actually just go straight ahead and sew your seams on the overlocker, and you can, with the exception of some of the work on the neckline, effectively the hemming and the top stitching, aside from the hemming and the top stitching, you can sew the entire garment on your overlocker, but it does take a bit of confidence and it does take a bit of practice. And I will openly admit that I often still use my machine before and use overlocking as a finishing stitch rather than as my main seams, just because it's a bit of the old measure twice, cut once, isn't it? But sometimes if it's something that I'm really comfortable with, a pattern that I know well and a fabric that I know well, something like a plain t-shirt, I will do the majority of it on the overlocker. But I get a lot of people in the shop that will say, oh, you know, I'm not very good with my overlocker because I'm still using my sewing machine first. And that's rubbish. Like, there's no written rule anywhere that says you should entirely sew your garments on the overlocker. We are not working in a garment factory. We can take as long as we want to get the results that we want. So don't put yourself down if that is you. It's silly. Okay, I've matched up the front notch and the front of that there, and you can see when we open it out, it's kind of in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for the other side whilst I've got this workspace set up, and then we can take it to the machine and sew it down. I'm going to take this to the machine and make sure that we are back on our lightning bolt stitch, and just carefully using that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance work along this shoulder seam. Okay, I can see that I've got that in nicely. I'm just checking it from the right side for any sort of tucks, but that all looks good. I'm going to go ahead and do the other side before I overlock these seams. And that's sleeve number 2 joined to the body piece, and now we end up with this kind of strange cross-shaped item. I think it's worth pointing out that you can use as many or as few pins and clips as you feel you need. You know, don't worry about putting tons and tons of pins in. If that's what makes you more confident, then you go with it. Also, if you want to hand tack these things in place and check that you're happy with them before you take them to the machine, that's a great idea. That's the way I was always taught to sew. My mum hand tacked everything, and yeah, it's still very, very good advice. I just think sometimes time, you know, you get things done a bit quicker if you're not hand tacking, and just experience as well means that you can skip that sometimes. I know that my mum would probably be cringing. So I'm just going to overlock that seam now. If I'm pressing the right pedal again, making the sewing machine go. When I tell you I am obsessed with these rainbow cones, I can't believe I've stocked them for so long and this is the first time I've tried them. They are awesome. It's funny because they all look different on the actual cone, and people sometimes don't believe me that they're the same colourway, but it's just how they wrap up on the actual cones. They're like, can I have two the same? They are the same. They just don't look it. You see they're looking at me like, Now then, you might notice that I am wearing a completely different outfit to the one that I was wearing in the first half of the video, and that's because it is now Monday. My camera battery actually ran out after the first session of filming, so I figured let's go home for the weekend and we'll come back, recharge and finish the shirt off this week. So let's get stuck in with part 2. I've got a nice fresh cup of tea and the shop is closed today, so we've got plenty of time to get cracking. Just to recap where we were up to, we had joined the shoulder seams, inserted the neckband and top stitched it down, and also the very last thing that we did was to insert the sleeves. So very, very happy with progress so far. I would say that the hard parts of this shirt are done. Now then, before going ahead and joining the side seams of the t-shirt, I'm actually going to press up the hems at the bottom and at the bottom of the sleeves whilst they are still open and flat, because that's going to save us trying to do it in the round later on, just to get that sort of memory hem already pressed in. So I'm going to move this machine out of the way and get the iron back out. Okay, and hopefully that's heating up nicely. That's great. So the hem allowance on this pattern is 1 inch. So all I'm going to do is turn my hem 1 inch wrong sides together just to get that crease into play. And what I like to do, this tiny little ironing board, is to start by doing that in the centre and then work my way out to the side, so it's not getting dragged in either direction. When I'm pressing a hem, my favourite tool to use is my little Prim sonic gauge, which I think I've mentioned to you earlier on. And I just like to check. Got a nice even amount there, so I'm just going to press in a little bit at 1 inch in the middle and then move along just across there and just keep going until we reach the edge. So you can see there that we have a nice crease pressed in. That's our hem pressed up. We're going to need to open this back out to work on joining the side seams, but once it's done, that crease is already going to be there for us to work with in the hemming steps. So I'm just going to go ahead and do the same thing for the other part of the bodice, and then I'm going to do the bottom of the sleeves as well, so I will catch you in a moment. Okay, so those memory hems are now pressed, and I've just skipped through in the editing for you. Just skip that out because nobody wants to watch somebody iron for 5 minutes. So our next job is going to be to join the side of the t-shirt, and we're going to do it in one continuous motion from underneath the arm all the way down the side on both sides. So the crucial part of this step for me, it means that we need to line up that underarm seam where the sleeve meets at the back. So I always like to start pinning this seam at that underarm point. So I'll show you how I do it. I'm bringing right sides together here. Here's my sleeve all the way down to the bottom of the bodice. I hope you can see there, sort of t-shirt shaped when you do that. And I like to bring together my 2 seam allowances, as you can see here, hopefully at the underarm, and all I do is line them together, sit them where I want to be and pinch. Then I'm going to take a pin, if I can find where I put them, over here. Whew, hair everywhere. I've just washed my hair, so it's all fluffy. So I like to take a pin and I pop it through from one side directly through the seam line and check that that is coming up on the other side exactly where I want it to be. So in effect, I'm joining those 2 lines at that point, and do the same again back through the other way, so that we've then got those 2 lines perfectly aligned. Now, might take a bit of wiggling. Don't always get it on the first try, but that's where we want to do it with a pin now. And that looks good. And then what I'm also going to do is pop a pin in the opposite direction, so facing outwards, just holding the seam allowance in the direction that I want it to go, which in this case is towards the sleeve. So actually, I just need to pop that the other way. There you go. So the important thing to remember is to not sew over those pins. Let's add some clips along the side of this side seam. It's very, very windy outside. So today is the day after storm, is it Isha? Very, very high winds here. Fortunately, we haven't sustained any damage either at home or at the shop, so that is a huge relief. I really don't like stormy season. It's incredibly stressful for me. We had a lot of storms when I was younger, when I was growing up, and a lot of damage to houses on our street. And I think I'm a little bit sort of traumatised by it. So stormy weather really makes me very anxious. So I believe we've got another storm rolling through on Tuesday. So batten down the hatches. There seems to have been a lot of them this year. Okay, so I'm just going to carry on adding pins, just at intervals where I feel comfortable, sort of every couple of inches, and that's one side pinned up and ready to sew with that pin there at the underarm seam. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do the other side and I'll catch you in a moment. So we're all pinned up and now it's time to get back to the machine. left my machine nice and threaded up over the weekend, so it should be good to go. We had a social session in on Saturday, which was lovely. Lots of ladies busy sewing away there, so I just need to make sure I'm back on the right stitch, which was my lightning bolt stitch. And all I'm going to do is I'll start with this side and start there at the bottom and work my way along. I'm now approaching the point where I'm reaching that underarm seam that I want to keep nice and neatly aligned. So I've sewn as close, I'm going to sew as close as I can to the pins without sewing over the pins. Very slowly just work my way up to them as close as I can get. And all I'm going to do at this point is carefully slide out the first pin, which is covering the actual line, and just hold it all in place and cross, and then remove the second pin, and hopefully that should get us in the region. So let's see if it's worked. There we go. So I'll show you my underarm seam. I'm hoping you can make it out on camera there. Got a lovely neat intersection. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and then it'll be time to overlock those underarm seams. Okay, I've got my fancy camera glasses on here, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to capture how I'm doing this to show you in a little bit more close-up detail. Right, so our next step is to overlock. So again, I'm just going to swap across to the other machine. Try not to throw my pins everywhere. Oops. Left the overlock. Oh dear. I left the overlocker out on Saturday for the ladies to use when they were in the social session, and everybody loved the rainbow cones. We were having so much fun watching them come out. So I'll go back inside out again, and just going to take that overlocking straight down the seam that we've just sewn, and get that neatly finished off, and just take time to make sure that no raw edges are, none of the body of the t-shirt is caught in places where it shouldn't be, and make sure that we're only cutting holes in the seam allowance. Sewing for me really is a case of learning through your mistakes and then sometimes making them again. It is not the kind of hobby that you are perfect at on the first go. So now we are definitely t-shirt shaped. Side seams are joined, the seam allowances are finished. Now before I put this overlocker away, can't say overlocker today. Before I put this overlocker away, I am just going to run around the bottom of all of the hems, not cutting any of the seam allowance off, but just finishing them so that when they're turned up and stitched down, those raw edges are neatened. Again, as I was saying in the first part of this video, if you don't have an overlocker, that's absolutely fine. Just leave them raw. Nobody's ever going to know but you, but in particular because I've got this lovely thread, I want to finish those edges off, so I'm going to whip around them. And this is an opportunity for me as well to make sure that my seam allowances are facing towards the back, and that is something that I consistently get wrong. I always start out with the best of intentions, but a seam allowance always ends up turned the wrong way for some reason. It's almost like a running joke with myself. So I'm going to line that one up there, start at that underarm seam and just go around the bottom of the sleeve. So now that I've got all of those raw edges finished, I'm going to re-press those memory hems that we've just done in the previous step, and make sure that everything is lying nice and flat and neat. And this is where it's really good that we've already put those creases in, because we're just going over something that's already there. And this is going to set those overlocking stitches nicely, just get them lying nice and flat. Okay. So everything is pressed and looking lovely and well finished, and that's now the overlocker finished with, so I can switch that off. Until next time, my friend. So I'm going to turn everything back the right way out and just move this iron, and I'm then going to add some pins along my hemline, because although we've pressed it, I still don't want it to move when it's on the machine. I want everything to be nice and evenly distributed. So I'm going to start off by lining that out flat, just there. And then either do this with pins or clips. I prefer to do this with pins at this stage, just because I think it gives a greater degree of accuracy when I'm getting it on the machine. I've done it with pins, so it's fine. I just think that sometimes pins are that little bit bulkier, so when they come up to the presser foot, you kind of lift the work. And when I'm doing a hem like this, I want it nice and flat. So in terms of hemming, you have several options available to you. Today, I'm just going to do a nice straightforward zigzag hem, which is something everybody can achieve at home without any special equipment or extra needles or any special machines. Like I say, if you don't have an overlocker and you're just leaving your edges raw, that's a fine way to do it as well. It's just in the same vein as this. So the other ways that we could finish a hem are by using a twin needle, which would give a really nice sort of mock cover stitched appearance. Now, if you look at any ready-to-wear knit garments, t-shirts, sweatshirts, that kind of things, you generally tend to find there's 2 rows of top stitching visible on the hems, and then at the reverse you have a stitch that looks a lot like overlocking, and that is done on a special machine called a cover stitch. Now, I do own a cover stitch, but it's not something that I would recommend purchasing unless you sew a lot of knits. I do sew a lot of knits, however, I'll be quite honest, I don't get a huge amount of use out of the cover stitch machine. If the Stretchy Mariflex thread had existed before I bought that machine, I probably wouldn't have bothered. But I do like it, and it does look very professional, as I say, and it's nice sort of if I'm doing lots of t-shirts in one go, I'll save up all my hemming, do it all at once. The other option that you have is to use a straight stitch and to use the Mariflex. Why can't I say it? The Mariflex thread. And you can just use an ordinary straight stitch then, and that is the beauty of that one, which also looks really nice and neat and professional. So today I'm going to use my zigzag stitch, and as I did with the neckline, I'm going to do 2.5 by 2.5, and I'm just going to work out here where I'm going to get that placed on the machine. So my hem is 1 inch deep. I don't really want it to be going over the edge, so I'm just going to take it slightly below that, maybe around 3/4. So I lost you for a short time there as I needed to recharge the camera again. I need to come up with a workaround for that. But I have had a coffee and a chocolate biscuit, and I have hemmed the sleeves off camera, but I'm going to go ahead now and just zigzag at around 20mm around this bottom hem, and then we should be finished. Just removing pins as I go. Don't sew over the pins. Okay, we are round. Just clip those. And what's nice here is that on the reverse side, my blue hemming stitches have just disappeared into that rainbow. And that is one completed Jackson t-shirt. So I'm going to go and see if, I'm very happy with the finish on this. I'm going to go and see if I can pop it on and show you it on me. Okay, so here is the finished result. This is my finished t-shirt. I'm very happy with how it's fitting across the neck and the shoulders. If I turn around to show you the back. I've opted for the longer length on the pattern here. The last time I made the cropped one, but this just gives me a few more options with sort of tucking and styling. But yes, as you can see, a really excellent plain basic t-shirt pattern, and I hope you enjoyed sewing along with me today. If you did enjoy this video, please do let me know. It's a slightly different departure to my usual style of content, but I'm trying new things, so please let me know your thoughts if you'd like to see any more, and maybe what I should sew next. Some ideas would be great. Just a note to say that if you are local, I am looking to put on this t-shirt pattern as a sewing class, as an evening sewing class very soon with myself teaching. So if you enjoyed this video, you can come and sew with me for real. Thanks guys, see you soon, and happy sewing.